At a lavish contract signing party, my wife publicly mocked me in front of our partners and colleagues, calling me a freeloader who had nothing to do with the deal. The room went silent when she deliberately had me escorted out of the VIP area. To everyone there, I was just a failed husband standing in the shadow of his wife's success. No one knew the truth. No one knew that without me, this deal would never have existed. If you enjoy stories about betrayal, hidden truths, and shocking turnarounds, make sure to subscribe to the channel. New stories are coming, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Mornings in Evanston usually start the same way. I drive my son to school, wait for him to slam the car door a little harder than necessary, then sit for a minute before pulling away. After that, I stop by the coffee place near the lake. Same order, same seat by the window if it's free. I don't rush. I've learned that moving slowly is the only way my thoughts stay in line. Work doesn't demand noise. The firm runs because systems are in place, not because someone raises their voice. By the time evening comes around, my head is already full, but my body is still calm. I expect home to feel the same. That night, it didn't. She was already dressed when I walked in, shoes on, phone in hand, talking fast. I caught fragments, guest list, sponsors, Manhattan, before she noticed me. "You're late." I wasn't, but I let that pass. Dinner sat untouched on the counter. She waved it off and kept scrolling. So I upgraded the table for the deal party, VIP section, better optics. The way she said it, like she just switched cable providers. I asked how much. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the screen. "It's covered. I used your card." There it was, not a question, not even a heads up. I stood there longer than I should have. Thought about pointing out that it wasn't a joint account. Thought about asking why she hadn't mentioned it earlier. Those thoughts lined up neatly, waited their turn, then stepped aside. "You don't need to do anything," she added. "Just show up, smile, be present. That's enough." She looked up then, smiled. Not warm, more like satisfied. I nodded once, hung my coat, moved past her toward the balcony. Cold air cut through the room when I slid the door open. Snow had started to settle along the railing, thin and uneven. I rested my hands there and let them sting a little. It helped me stay where I was instead of saying what I shouldn't. This wasn't new. She'd been setting the pace for a while. What we attended, who we sat with, how I introduced myself. Somewhere along the way, my name became optional. My presence, a box to check. I told myself it didn't matter. I had told myself that a lot lately. From outside, I could hear her on the phone now. Yes, he'll be there. Of course. He knows it's important. I stayed quiet, let the words slide past me like traffic. When I went back in, she'd already moved on to something else. Asked me what suit I planned to wear. Said the gray one looked less executive. Suggested navy, then black, then shrugged, like it was all minor. I said fine. She went into the bedroom. I stayed in the living room, turned off a lamp, straightened a stack of mail that didn't need straightening. My phone buzzed with a notification from the bank. I didn't open it. Later, when she was asleep, I stood in the hallway and listened to the hum of the house. Everything worked the way it was supposed to. Heat, lights, locks. That was the problem. Systems don't complain when you lean on them too hard. I grabbed my keys and eased the door shut behind me. The garage smelled faintly of oil and cold concrete. I sat in the car without starting it, thought about the morning drive, about coffee, about how easy it had become to let decisions happen around me instead of through me. Snow crunched under the tires when I finally pulled out. The streetlights blurred past as I headed nowhere in particular, already rehearsing the next day in my head, already moving forward because stopping felt like the wrong thing to do. The next morning didn't wait for me to catch up. An email sat at the top of my inbox before I'd finished my first coffee. Subject line was neutral, expense confirmation. I opened it without thinking, then slowed down halfway through the list. Numbers added up too cleanly to be accidental. The VIP table, a sponsorship tier I hadn't approved. Service fees routed through an events firm I didn't recognize. Before I could close it, 3 calendar invites came in. Back-to-back meetings, Manhattan addresses. Names I knew, some I didn't. They weren't sent by my assistant. They came from hers. By the time I reached the office, a few replies were already waiting. Looking forward to seeing you both in New York. Congrats on your wife's momentum. Glad you're supporting her expansion. None of them asked what I thought. I kept my jacket on longer than usual. walked past the glass offices without stopping. The firm moved the way it always did, steady and indifferent. That helped. Systems don't react to embarrassment. At my desk, I forwarded the expense email to accounting. Short note, no tone. Please pull a full report tied to this event. Today. No explanation, no urgency markers, just the request. A message popped up from one of the junior partners. Didn't realize you were stepping back. Thought this was her show now. I stared at the screen, let the sentence sit there. Considered correcting him. Considered ignoring it. Instead, I typed something that wouldn't ripple. We're aligned on different parts of the process. Technically true, uselessly vague. The rest of the morning folded in on itself. Calls came in, not hostile, just slightly off. People spoke slower, like they were choosing words meant for someone else. I listened more than I talked. Took notes I didn't need. Let the misunderstanding settle into the room without feeding it. By noon, I needed air that didn't belong to the firm. I walked a few blocks toward the loop and slipped into a small diner tucked between offices that had outlived their importance. Same place C2 and I had used for years. No reservations, no posturing. He was already there, coffee untouched, jacket draped over the chair like he hadn't planned to stay long. "You look busy," he said. "I am. You look quiet, too." I slid into the booth. Didn't argue. He waited. That was his habit, letting silence do the work. I told him about the charges, the invites, the tone shift, not the balcony, not the smile, just the facts. He didn't react the way people usually do when they hear about marital friction. No sympathy, no advice. "Do you think they're respecting your boundaries?" he asked. The question landed harder than expected, not because it was sharp, but because it assumed I had boundaries to begin with. I didn't say they weren't. You didn't say they were either. I stirred my coffee even though I hadn't added sugar. It's complicated. Everything is. That's not the same thing. I glanced toward the window. Traffic crawled by. People crossed the street mid-call, mid-sentence, mid-life. "You've spent years making sure things don't break," he continued. Sometimes people confuse that with permission. I didn't answer. He didn't push. We talked about work instead. A case he was handling. A contract dispute that hinged on a single line buried in an appendix. I listened carefully. That was easier. Legal language had rules. Emotions didn't. Back at the office, accounting sent the report. The numbers told a story without drama. Charges routed through personal and corporate channels. Approvals listed under my name that I hadn't given. A few entries marked pending, waiting on final authorization. Mine. I didn't confront anyone. Didn't forward the file. Didn't ask for clarification. I saved it to a folder that didn't exist yesterday and locked it with a password I wouldn't forget. Another message came in. This one from an investor I trusted. "Heard your wife's building something big. Let me know if you're stepping aside or if I should keep looping you in." Stepping aside. The phrase followed me for the rest of the afternoon. Into a call I barely spoke on. Into the hallway when I passed my reflection and barely recognized the posture. On the drive home, my phone stayed face down. Not out of discipline, out of fatigue. The house felt unchanged when I walked in. Same shoes by the door. Same faint hum from the fridge. She wasn't home yet. I set my briefcase down. Didn't open it. Sat at the kitchen table and reviewed the report again, slower this time. Cross-checked dates. Looked for patterns instead of offenses. By the time her car pulled into the driveway, I'd already decided not to mention any of it. Not yet. She came in talking. About a call. About a seating chart. About who needed reassurance before Friday. I listened. Nodded when appropriate. Asked one neutral question. "Did you loop my office into the planning?" She paused. Just a beat. "It's taken care of." That answer didn't close anything. It just moved the weight somewhere else. Later, after she went to bed, I opened my laptop again. Not to argue, not to accuse, to understand the shape of what was forming around me. One tab led to another. Emails to invoices. Invoices to names. Names to patterns. Outside, the street settled into its usual quiet. Inside, the house kept running the way systems always do, even as I kept reading, following the trail where it naturally went. The call came in while I was reviewing a vendor agreement. Unknown number. I let it ring once before answering. "Hi, this is Mark from the event ops team. Just wanted to confirm you're still the final approver on the sponsorship package." I didn't answer right away. "Sorry," he added quickly. "I might have the wrong person. This is... right?" He said my name, correctly. "What sponsorship package?" I asked. Paper shuffled on his end, a pause long enough to feel rehearsed. "The Manhattan Deal Party, the VIP tier. We were told nothing moves without your sign-off." I told him he did have the wrong person, that I hadn't approved anything, that he should check his notes. He apologized, hung up fast. The silence afterward felt heavier than the call itself. Not dramatic, just inconvenient, like a loose thread you can't ignore once you've noticed it. For a moment, I wondered if I was overreacting. The firm ran on delegation. My wife was capable. Maybe she'd misunderstood the chain of approval. Maybe Mark had mixed up names. That explanation almost worked. Then a notification slid across my screen. Transfer pending, a large one, routed from her company account, labeled advance. I stared at the number, didn't blink, didn't move. When I asked her about it later, I kept my voice even. Did something change with the event budget? She didn't look up from her phone. It's just temporary. You know how these things work. Temporary for what? To secure commitments. Everyone does it. Her answers came quick, too quick, like she'd practiced them for someone else. I nodded, let it go. Or at least that's what it looked like. By the end of the week, her parents had opinions. They always did, but now they arrived dressed as concern. "You're the man of the house," her mother said over dinner. "It's normal for you to handle the financial side." Her father added something about sacrifice, about how success requires support from behind the scenes. I chewed slowly, listened, said nothing. None of them asked what I thought. They assumed they knew. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Not angry, focused. I pulled up old emails, cross-referenced them with the new ones, checked timestamps, compared language. Patterns started to show themselves when I stopped looking for intent and started looking for structure. Certain approvals routed around me. Not all. Just enough to create plausible deniability. A shared spreadsheet updated without notifications. A calendar invite forwarded, then canceled, then resent with a different sender. Small things. The kind that only matter if you're paying attention. I began saving copies, screenshots, PDFs. Nothing dramatic, just enough to reconstruct a timeline if I ever needed to. Calls came in during the day. I started taking notes afterward. Who called, what they asked, how they framed it. I didn't accuse, didn't correct, just documented. One afternoon, I noticed something else. A recurring email thread between her assistant and someone in my finance department. Casual tone, familiar shorthand, no malicious language, just convenience. I forwarded the thread to myself, then removed my finance lead from that channel. Quietly, no announcement. Within an hour, I got a message. "Hey, did something change with approvals?" "Yes," I replied. Streamlining, no follow-up. The shift was subtle, but it rippled. Questions that used to bypass me now landed back on my desk. A few people sounded irritated. One sounded relieved. Most acted like I was interrupting a system that had been working fine without my input. That stung more than I expected. At home, the mood tightened. She became careful with her words. Shorter answers, more phone calls taken in the other room. "You okay?" she asked one night, not meeting my eyes. "I'm fine." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole thing. I started to wonder if I was the problem. If my silence had trained everyone around me to move without checking. If drawing lines now made me look controlling. Late at night, those thoughts had a way of stacking up. Still, the numbers didn't lie. Neither did the paper trail. By Friday, the advance had cleared. Another charge appeared, smaller, same vendor, different justification. I added it to the folder. At work, someone joked that I was back in the loop. I smiled politely, didn't explain. The weekend passed in fragments. Errands, a movie with my son, laundry folded while half listening to updates about seating arrangements and guest sensitivities. On Sunday evening, her sister dropped by, mentioned how lucky my wife was to have someone who didn't need credit. That night, after the house went quiet again, I reviewed everything one more time, not to convince myself, to check for gaps. What I found instead was consistency, a shape forming around decisions that weren't mine, justified by access that came from being close to me. I closed the laptop, left it on the table. From the bedroom, I heard her moving around, drawers opening, a zipper sliding shut. I stayed where I was, staring at the screen as it dimmed on its own, already planning what to verify next, already following the path that had opened without asking whether I wanted to walk it. She chose the rooftop bar herself, said it had the right mix of casual and important. I didn't argue. I showed up in the jacket she'd suggested earlier in the week and stood where there was space, close enough to be seen, far enough not to interrupt. People filtered in by clusters. Some I recognized. Others wore confidence like a borrowed coat. Glasses clinked. Names floated past me without landing. She moved easily through the room, laughed at the right moments, touched arms, leaned in. I watched the way attention followed her, the way she'd learned to collect it without asking. Someone asked how the New York deal was coming along. Better than expected, she said. We're locking things in. Her hand brushed my sleeve. He's been very supportive. The word hung there, light and polished. A few minutes later, another group circled around. Someone joked about power couples. Someone else asked how we managed work-life balance. She smiled wider this time. Oh, he's great at staying out of the way. That's his strength. I bring in the money. He keeps things quiet. A laugh followed. Not loud, comfortable. I felt it then. Not anger, recognition. Eyes flicked toward me, some curious, some amused. One person looked away immediately. Another raised an eyebrow, then took a sip. I didn't respond, didn't correct her, didn't step in. I shifted my weight and listened to the rhythm of the room change slightly, like a current adjusting around a rock. When the conversation moved on, I stayed where I was, paid attention to who came back to me afterward, who avoided me, who said nothing but adjusted their tone. This was how things worked, not through declarations, through cues. On the ride home she was energized, talked about who might be useful in Manhattan, mentioned someone's husband who'd finally learned his role, laughed. I drove, kept my eyes on the road. You were quiet tonight, she said. I didn't have much to add. That's fine. It played well. Played. The next morning, I was already at my desk when the email came in. Subject line flagged urgent. Not from her. From an events firm in New York. They needed confirmation on a bond. A guarantee listed under my name. For a logistics partner tied to the deal party. I read it twice, then a third time. The amount wasn't small. It wasn't symbolic either. If something went wrong, responsibility would land squarely on me. I called her. Did you authorize a guarantee using my name? A pause, short, measured. It's standard. They needed reassurance. From me? You're the safest name on paper. The way she said it made my chest tighten. Not because it was untrue, because it was assumed. We should have talked about it. There wasn't time. There's always time to ask. She exhaled, sharp. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. I asked for the documents. Send me everything tied to that bond. Why? Because my name is on it. She sent partial files, missing pages, enough to stall, not enough to clarify. I filled in the rest myself. Calls followed. From the firm. From a partner I hadn't spoken to in months. Everyone wanted reassurance. Everyone assumed I'd already agreed. By midday, the weight had shifted. This wasn't about perception anymore. It was about exposure. At lunch, I sat with the paperwork spread out in front of me. Numbers, clauses, exit points. The bond tied directly to the success of a segment she didn't fully control. If it failed, the story wouldn't be complicated. It would be mine to explain. I forwarded the documents to C2. No commentary, just the files. His response came back quickly. She crossed the line. That was all. I didn't reply. Back home that evening, she was distracted. Phone buzzing, messages stacking up. She talked about travel logistics, seating adjustments, a client who needed special handling. I listened, watched her move through the kitchen without noticing the stack of mail I'd left open on the counter. The bond agreement sat on top. She saw it eventually, stopped. You didn't need to involve anyone else. I needed to understand my risk. You're protected. By whom? She didn't answer. Dinner passed quietly. Plates cleared. No argument. No resolution. Later, as she packed for New York, I reviewed the guarantee again. Not to panic, to map consequences. I saw clearly then what I'd been avoiding. Silence hadn't kept the peace. It had created space for decisions to be made without me, then justified by my absence. From the bedroom, she asked if I'd picked up my suit from the cleaner. "I'll handle it," I said. She zipped the bag shut. I stayed at the table, pen in hand, making a short list of questions that needed answers before the week ended, already adjusting my calendar in my head as the house settled around us. The package showed up without a return address. Reception buzzed me just after lunch. "There's an envelope here for you. No sender listed." I told them to send it up. Inside were printed spreadsheets, bank statements, and a scanned agreement labeled temporary loan. The names on it were familiar, my wife's company, one of her relatives listed as lender. The terms were loose, in a way that wasn't accidental. No fixed repayment date, no interest, just access. A sticky note sat on top. One sentence, written in block letters. "This money is being used to buy position and access for the deal." No signature, no explanation. I didn't rush to conclusions. I checked the numbers first. Dates matched the advances I'd already flagged. Amounts aligned with the sponsorship tiers and vendor retainers. The timeline filled in gaps I hadn't been able to close on my own. I scanned the agreement into my system, then locked the physical copy in my desk. No one needed to see me react. An hour later, I was sitting across from C2 in a glass conference room overlooking the river. He didn't ask where the documents came from. He didn't need to. "If you stay quiet," he said, tapping the page with his pen, "this becomes your responsibility." I didn't sign that agreement. "Your name anchors the structure. That's enough." He leaned back slightly. "Right now, you're the safest shield in the room. Everyone benefits from that except you." I watched a barge move slowly past the window. The city kept working. "What happens if I pull away?" "Then the truth has to stand on its own." I nodded. Not in agreement, in recognition. By the time I got back to my office, my phone had 3 missed calls. One from an investor I'd known for years. One from a consultant tied to the New York event. One from a number I didn't have saved. I answered the last one. "Hey," she said quickly, "just wanted to clear the air. People are saying you're under a lot of stress." "Who's saying that?" "It doesn't matter. I've been telling them you're just being careful, that's all." Careful. The word followed me into the next call. "Everything okay on your end?" someone asked. "We've heard you're tightening up approvals. Hope that doesn't slow things down." Each conversation landed the same way, not confrontational, framed as concern, designed to make me look like the obstacle. That evening, I didn't bring anything up at home. I cooked, cleaned, listened to updates about flight times and guest sensitivities. She spoke faster than usual, filling space. Later, while she showered, I logged into the bank portal and removed the secondary card attached to my account. No announcement, no message, just a confirmation screen and a quiet click. Next, I separated approval authority on all active projects. Anything above a threshold now required dual signatures, mine included. I scheduled an internal audit for the following week. Routine language, no accusations. The reaction was immediate. "Why can't I access the account?" she asked from the bedroom. "Changes at work." "You didn't tell me." I didn't need to. She stood there, towel around her shoulders, eyes narrowing just enough to register the shift. "This isn't the time for control games. I'm not playing a game." She turned away without another word. The next day, more calls came in, this time with an edge. "She says you're freezing her out. This deal needs flexibility. You're risking relationships." I let them talk, took notes, didn't argue. At lunch, I received a message from accounting, confirming the audit schedule. Another from legal acknowledging the changes to approval structure. I forwarded both to C2. "You're doing this clean," he replied. At home, the air felt tighter. Conversations shortened. Doors closed more often. Her parents called, asked if everything was okay, suggested compromise, reminded me of how much was riding on the event. "You've always been steady," her father said. "Don't let nerves ruin something good." I thanked him, ended the call. That night, she tried a different approach, sat closer on the couch, lowered her voice. "You know I wouldn't do anything to hurt us. I know what I've seen. You're reading things wrong. Then the audit will clear it. She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up her phone and stepped into the other room. I stayed where I was, opened my laptop, reviewed the folder one more time, cross-checked the loan agreement against the sponsorship schedule. Everything lined up too well to be coincidence. There was no middle ground left, not without me carrying weight that wasn't mine. I shut the laptop and set it aside, stood up, turned off the living room light. In the bedroom, she was already packing, clothes folded tighter than necessary, phone wedged between shoulder and ear. "I'll handle it," she said into the call. I paused at the doorway long enough to register the words, then walked past, heading toward the garage to grab something from the car, already adjusting my next steps as the door closed behind me. Work stopped being loud without me noticing when it happened. Emails turned into documents, documents into columns, columns into decisions that could be reversed with the right clause and the right timing. I spent hours reviewing contracts I hadn't touched in years, not because I didn't trust them, but because I needed to know exactly where leverage lived. Money leaves tracks if you let it. I followed transfers across accounts, matched them to vendor invoices, then cross-checked everything against authorization logs. When something didn't line up, I didn't flag it. I copied it, built a list instead, short, precise. One withdrawal clause appeared more than once. Another showed up buried in an appendix no one ever reads. I highlighted those, not out of excitement, out of necessity. Sleep came in pieces, 2 hours here, 1 hour there. Enough to function, more than enough to think. My head stayed clear in a way it hadn't for months. No rehearsed arguments, no imaginary apologies, just steps. At the office, I kept my door closed more often. People adjusted. Meetings shortened. Requests arrived with cleaner language. A few stopped altogether. Someone from facilities asked if I'd be traveling the following week. "New York," I said. "Do you have a confirmed departure time?" TSA's been unpredictable. I gave him a vague answer. Later, I checked my calendar. No reason for him to need that information. An hour after that, I noticed an access log on my email account showing a sign-in attempt that wasn't mine. Location matched a device my wife sometimes used when she forgot hers. I changed the password, didn't mention it. That evening, my phone buzzed while I was eating alone at my desk. "Please don't do this like this." Her message didn't specify what this was. It didn't need to. "We're all watching," she added. "You're embarrassing me." I set the phone face down, finished my meal, took a walk around the block before going back inside. By Thursday, I had copies of every guarantee tied to the event. Some bore my name, others referenced my firm indirectly. None had my signature. I requested originals, framed it as routine. No one questioned it. When they arrived, I scanned them, then returned them exactly as received. At home, conversation shrank to logistics. Who was leaving when? Which bag went where? No accusations, no explanations. She watched me more closely now, paused when I entered a room, picked up her phone if I sat too near. "You're acting strange," she said once, halfway between irritation and concern. "I'm busy." "With what?" "Work." That answer ended the conversation, not because it satisfied her, because it didn't invite more. Friday morning, a message came in from a number I didn't recognize. "You should think about how this looks." No greeting, no name. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to C2 with a note. "Anything here?" "Pressure," he replied. "That's all it is." In the afternoon, I received a call from the airline confirming my ticket. First class, seat assignment updated, a meal preference I hadn't selected. Someone had been adjusting my itinerary. I called the airline back and locked the booking, added a note requiring verification for any changes. The agent didn't ask questions. At home that night, she packed with the door half closed. I heard zippers, drawers opening and shutting. The cadence was familiar, controlled. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," she said without looking up when I stepped in. "I'm not. People talk. They always do." She sighed, sat on the bed. "You know how this ends if you push." I waited, let her finish. "You'll look petty, defensive. Everyone will think you couldn't handle being in the background." I picked up my phone, scrolled through the folder one more time. Didn't show her. "That's their problem." She stood, walked past me toward the bathroom. "Just don't humiliate me in front of everyone." I didn't answer. The night before the flight, I set my alarm earlier than usual, laid out my clothes without asking for input, printed one document and slipped it into my briefcase. Outside, the street stayed quiet. Inside, the house held its breath. At the airport, I noticed a man glance at me twice near security. Not threatening, just attentive. Another traveler asked if I was headed to the same event. Work trip, I said. On the plane, I didn't open my laptop. I watched messages come in and left them unanswered. Her name appeared once. I ignored it. As the city disappeared beneath the clouds, I reviewed the list in my head. What could be stopped? What couldn't? Where the pressure points lived. By the time we began descent, the noise inside me had settled into something narrow and deliberate. I checked the time, adjusted my watch, and stood when my row was called, moving with the line toward the exit as the day finally caught up to where I was headed. I arrived earlier than necessary, not out of anxiety, out of habit. The hotel entrance was already busy. Men in tailored jackets, women moving with practiced ease, everyone stepping into a version of themselves meant for display. I stood across the street for a moment, watching the flow bend toward the doors, and felt oddly detached, like I was observing a system I used to help design, but no longer controlled. Inside, staff checked names against lists. Mine was there. Hers was highlighted. She spotted me near the bar before I reached her, walked over quickly, smile fixed in place. "You're late," she said. "I'm not. Come on, stand closer. People are watching." She adjusted my jacket collar without asking, positioned me half a step behind her, close enough to be seen, far enough to stay silent. "Just follow my lead tonight," she whispered. "Smile when I smile. Don't drift." Family members gathered nearby, her parents, a cousin I barely knew. They nodded at me politely, then turned their attention back to her. Colleagues followed. People whose calls I'd returned for years without needing to announce it. Someone asked how things were going. "Better than ever," she said. "This deal changes everything." A hand landed briefly on my arm. "He's been great support," she added. "Couldn't do it without him staying flexible." Flexible. The word had weight now. Music picked up. Glasses refilled. Conversations overlapped. I stayed where she'd placed me. Watched the rhythm of the room tighten around her. At one point, she leaned in. "You're not smiling." "I'm listening." "You're making people uncomfortable." "Who?" "Me." She straightened, attention already shifting back to the group forming around her. I stayed still, let the discomfort exist without trying to smooth it. Later, someone from her team asked a question about approvals. I answered honestly, short, clear. She cut in before I finished. "That's all handled," she said, voice sharper than before. "We don't need to get into that here." The smile returned quickly. The edge didn't. A few minutes after that, she took the microphone, thanked sponsors, thanked partners, thanked people who'd helped her build momentum. I wasn't mentioned. Then she glanced in my direction. "And of course," she said lightly, "my husband is here. He doesn't really get involved in the business side. He prefers to sit back and let me work." A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Not cruel, comfortable. "He's very good at staying quiet," she added. "That's his role." Something in my chest shifted, not sharply, slowly, like a door closing without being slammed. She kept talking. Jokes landed. Applause followed. When she lowered the mic, she turned to me, eyes hard behind the smile. "Why would you do that to me?" she hissed. "You're ruining this." I didn't say anything. "Your face did." She gestured toward the VIP section. "Go. You don't need to be here." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. People nearby pretended not to hear. Someone looked at their phone. Someone else laughed a second too late. I stood there for a moment, long enough to feel the full shape of it. This wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't anger either. It was clarity. Silence hadn't protected anyone. It had erased me in real time. I stepped away without responding, walked past the bar, past the staff who'd been trained not to react, past the doors that led back out to the main hall. Music followed me into the corridor, muted but persistent. In the lobby, the air felt different, not calmer, just honest. I sat down on a low chair near the windows, loosened my tie, let my hands rest where they fell. Messages buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check them. Across the room, guests drifted in and out of elevators. Someone argued quietly with a concierge. Someone laughed too loudly. A man in a dark suit walked past, then slowed, looked again. Recognition flickered. He didn't stop, just nodded slightly and kept going. I stayed seated, watched the revolving door turn, watched people step through and disappear. Inside the ballroom, applause swelled again. Another speech, another round. I thought about the documents in my briefcase, about the approvals waiting on my name, about how many people were counting on me not to move. The idea of standing up didn't feel dramatic. It felt necessary in the way breathing does after being underwater too long. I checked the time, adjusted my cuff. From the far end of the lobby, voices rose. Someone important had arrived. Staff moved faster. I stood and walked toward the hallway that led to the conference rooms, passing beneath signs that pointed toward private meetings and restricted access, letting the noise from the party trail behind me as I followed the direction my feet had already chosen. I stayed in the lobby longer than I planned, not because I was unsure, because timing mattered more than movement. My phone rested in my palm. I scrolled through the investment terms again, slower this time. Exit clauses, approval language, the parts people skim when they assume someone else is watching. A message from C2 sat unread at the top. I opened it. If they sign today using your name, you carry the liability. Let the truth speak in the room where it counts. No punctuation, no warmth, just clarity. Across the lobby, a group broke off from the elevators. Familiar faces moved with the ease of people who expect doors to open. One of them slowed, then looked again. Recognition sharpened his expression. He approached without drawing attention, kept his voice low. Didn't expect to see you out here. Things change. He nodded. We'd worked together years ago, back when discretion meant survival. Your wife's been telling people you're hands off, he said, that you're just supportive. I didn't react. That's interesting, he continued, because the legal file lists you as final approver. Everything routes through your authority. That was the missing piece. Not new information. Confirmation. They're waiting on leadership upstairs, he added. Looks like they're ready to close. He gave a brief nod and moved on, rejoining his group without another word. I looked toward the ballroom entrance. Laughter spilled out in waves. Applause followed, timed and predictable. She was still in control in there, at least on the surface. My phone vibrated again. Another message from her. Where did you go? I didn't answer. Instead, I stood and walked toward the hallway marked for private meetings. The carpet muted footsteps. Signs pointed toward conference rooms tucked away from the noise. Staff moved with purpose, checking badges, whispering into headsets. Halfway down the hall, I stopped long enough to take out the document I'd printed earlier. Folded once, slipped into the inside pocket of my jacket. Voices approached from the far end. Executives, advisors, the cadence of people about to make decisions. She appeared at the corner, flanked by two partners. Her smile faltered when she saw me. What are you doing here? She asked, keeping her tone light. Going to the meeting. You don't need to be there. My name does. Her jaw tightened. She glanced at the others, then back at me. We talked about this. We didn't. She stepped closer. You're going to make this messy. I'm going to make it accurate. A door opened behind us. Someone called for the group to come in. She hesitated. Just a moment. Long enough for the gap to show. Inside the room, chairs scraped softly as people took their places. I chose a seat near the end of the table. Not dominant. Not peripheral. Present. She sat across from me, avoided my eyes. The CEO entered last. No announcement. Just a shift in attention. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Let's begin, he said. She launched into her presentation, confident, polished, spoke about momentum and partnerships, thanked supporters, positioned herself as the driver of the deal. No one interrupted. When she finished, the CEO nodded once. We'll need final authorization to proceed. Silence stretched. She glanced at me, then back at him. That's handled, she said. My team... From him, the CEO said, eyes settling on me. She turned fully now. Shock flickered, then annoyance. I told you he's not involved in the operational side. I didn't speak yet. Let the words settle. The file says otherwise, the CEO replied. His signature is required. She laughed lightly. That's just structure, for optics. I reached into my jacket and placed the document on the table, slid it forward. "Optics don't assume liability," I said. "Terms do." The room shifted, not dramatically, subtly. The CEO scanned the page, then the next. "You're the principal," he said, looking up. I nodded once. Across the table, her posture stiffened. The confidence drained slowly, replaced by calculation. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "We can clear it up after." "I'm withdrawing the capital," I said. No raised voice, no emphasis. "Effective immediately, per clause 12. A pause, then murmurs. "You can't do that," she said, leaning forward now. "You're sabotaging everything." "No, I'm ending my exposure." The CEO closed the folder. "We'll adjourn." Chairs moved again. People gathered their things. Conversations stayed low. She remained seated, hands clenched. "You promised to support me," she said when the room emptied. "I did. This isn't support." "I know." I stood, straightened my jacket, looked at her without anger. "You were strong because I stood behind you, not because you didn't need me." She didn't respond. In the hallway, staff waited for instructions that wouldn't come. Phones buzzed. Schedules collapsed quietly. I walked past them toward the elevators, pressed the button, waited. When the doors opened, I stepped inside alone and let them close, watching the numbers change as the car descended, already thinking about the call I'd make next, already moving into the space that opened when I stopped holding everything up. The room filled in stages, advisors first, legal teams next. People who rarely looked up from documents took their seats and opened folders they already knew by heart. She stood at the head of the table when I walked in. Confident posture, controlled pace, the version of herself she'd practiced. "Let's get started," she said, as if timing belonged to her. I took a seat near the end, didn't interrupt, let her speak. She outlined the deal with ease. Revenue projections, strategic positioning, relationships she'd cultivated. Her eyes flicked toward me once, briefly, the way you check whether an object is still where you left it. I stayed still. The CEO entered halfway through her presentation. Conversation stopped without being told to. He nodded at a few people, then took his seat. "Continue," he said. She didn't miss a beat. Finished strong. Smiled. "This partnership represents momentum," she concluded. "We're ready to move forward." The CEO folded his hands. "Before we do, I need to confirm final authorization." She glanced around the table, then answered smoothly. "That's already in place." "From whom?" "From the firm," she said. "From my team." His eyes shifted to me. "That's not what the file says." Silence moved across the table. Not heavy, expectant. "I'm listed as the final approver," I said. She laughed softly. "That's outdated. He's not involved in the operational side anymore." "That's not accurate," the CEO replied. She turned toward me fully now. "This is about ego, isn't it?" she said. "You can't stand that I'm the one closing deals now." A few heads lifted. "You've always needed control," she continued. "You don't understand how relationships work. You see numbers, not people." Her voice sharpened. "This is jealousy. Plain and simple." I didn't respond. Reached into my briefcase instead. The folder landed on the table with a muted sound, not forceful, deliberate. "What's this?" she asked. "Documentation," I said. The CEO opened it first, scanned a page, then another. "Capital flows," I added. "Guarantees, violations of approval terms." She leaned forward. "You're twisting things." "The dates don't twist." I slid another document forward. "That bond was issued under my name without consent. That advance came from a related party tied to this deal. Both breach clause 12. The CEO looked up. "Is this accurate?" She hesitated, just long enough. "We can clarify offline." "We're clarifying now," he said. She turned back to me, voice rising. "You're destroying everything I built. I'm ending what I'm liable for. You promised to support me. I supported you. You replaced me." The room stayed quiet. No one intervened. The CEO closed the folder. "This transaction exists because of his authorization," he said. "Without it, there is no deal." She shook her head. "You can't just take his side." "This isn't a side," he replied. "It's governance." He looked at me again. "Your decision?" "I'm withdrawing the capital," I said, "effective immediately." A breath moved through the room. Not surprise, adjustment. "You can't do that," she said, standing now. "You'll look petty. The clause allows it. You'll ruin relationships." They weren't mine. The CEO nodded once. Understood. He stood. Others followed. "We'll reconvene after reassessing exposure." The meeting dissolved without ceremony. Chairs slid back, papers gathered. Conversations broke into low clusters. She remained standing, hands braced against the table. "You planned this," she said quietly. "I prepared. You embarrassed me. I stopped lying for you." She searched my face for something. Anger, regret, doubt. Nothing came. I picked up my briefcase and walked toward the door. "This isn't over," she said behind me. "It is for me." Out in the hallway, voices overlapped. Someone asked about next steps. Someone else checked a phone. I kept moving. At the elevator, a few people nodded as I passed. One of them spoke. "Boss." The word wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to be. I didn't correct him. The doors opened. I stepped inside. The space filled briefly, then emptied as others chose different cars. As the elevator descended, my phone buzzed again. Her name. Missed calls stacked. I slid the phone back into my pocket without checking. When the doors opened in the lobby, the noise of the party filtered in from a distance. Music still played. Glasses still clinked. I walked past it all and out through the front doors, turning toward the street as traffic moved along like it always had, already thinking about the drive back, about what needed to be done next, and about how quiet everything felt once I stopped carrying what was never mine to hold. The flight back to Chicago left late. I didn't text anyone. Sat in the car at the airport garage longer than necessary, watching headlights slide past on the highway below like nothing had happened anywhere else. Driving home felt different, not lighter, looser, as if something that had been wrapped too tightly for too long finally let go. I didn't turn on the radio, let the road handle the noise. Near dawn, I stopped by the lake, parked, stepped out, walked a short stretch without checking the time. Cold air worked its way through my jacket. That was fine. It kept me present. The habit I'd lived with for years surfaced there, plain and unavoidable. Taking on responsibility to keep things smooth. Absorbing weight so others wouldn't have to feel it. Calling that stability. Calling that love. That habit had cost more than it ever returned. After sunrise, I went back to the house in Evanston. Didn't wake her. Packed what I needed. Clothes first, documents next. The rest could wait. I left the keys on the counter, not as a statement, because I wouldn't need them. By noon, legal notices were drafted. Asset separation filed according to the book. Guarantees terminated. Authorizations revoked. Each step handled cleanly, without commentary. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't offer explanations. Messages started coming in. From her. From people who suddenly wanted context. I didn't answer. An internal notice confirmed the audit findings later that afternoon. Improper transfers, conflicts of interest, exposure that no one wanted to claim publicly. Her project stalled within days. Sponsors pulled back. Committees asked questions that couldn't be smoothed over with charm. The position she'd built collapsed under scrutiny, not drama. I didn't celebrate. I didn't follow updates closely either. What mattered was containment. I moved into a smaller place closer to my son's school. Kept my schedule tight. Pickups on time, dinners simple. Work handled in blocks instead of spilling everywhere. At the firm, conversations shifted. Fewer assumptions, clearer boundaries. People adjusted quickly when structure returned. She tried to reach me again the following week. Left a message this time. "We should talk. This got out of hand." I listened to it once, didn't save it. Her parents called next, asked about reconciliation. Suggested mediation. I thanked them for their concern and declined. The pressure faded after that. Not immediately, but steadily, like water receding once the source is cut off. Weeks passed. Paperwork closed out. Accounts settled. Investigations moved forward without my involvement. Her name appeared less often. When it did, it wasn't tied to momentum anymore. I didn't correct narratives. Didn't offer my version. People believed what they needed to believe. That was no longer my work. Mornings settled into a rhythm. Drop-offs, coffee by the lake when time allowed. The same place, the same order. One morning my phone buzzed while I was paying. Missed calls stacked on the screen, her name among them. I turned the phone face down. The barista handed me the cup, asked how my day was going. "Fine," I said. I took my seat by the window, let the cup warm my hands, watched people pass without assigning meaning to their expressions. Nothing dramatic followed. No final conversation, no apology, no forgiveness. Just distance, properly measured. When I finished, I stood, tossed the empty cup, and walked out, locking the car with a quiet click before pulling into traffic, letting the day move forward without checking who might still be trying to reach me.